Tel Aviv 360, Israel's largest and most diverse podcast.
So shortly after 6 p.m. on May 8th, the billowing white smoke signaled to the crowds gathered in St. Peter's Square and to the world at large that the cardinal electors gathered in the Sistine Chapel elected a new pope. About an hour later, his identity was revealed. Robert Francis Prevost, who has taken the papal name Leo XIV, the first American-born pontiff. We are delighted to have with us today at Tel Aviv 360 one of the leading scholars in the world on church history and religious studies to discuss the current events occupying the Catholic world and more specifically the Conclave and its fascinating history. Professor Alberto Melloni is a full professor of the history of Christianity at the University of Modena and Reggio, Emilia. He holds the UNESCO Chair for Religious Pluralism and Peace at Sapienza University in Rome and directs the Foundation for Religious Studies based at the University of Bologna. Professor Melloni, thank you so much for being with us today. It is my understanding that you are visiting us at Tel Aviv after spending the last few days and the days of the conclave in Rome. Would you mind if we started by talking a little bit about the atmosphere around the Vatican during the days leading up to the conclave and during the conclave?
Well, for an historian of the conclaves, what happened in the past weeks is everything but surprising. So there is a narrative saying that the church is in crisis, churches are empty, people are abandoning the practice of the Catholic faith and so on. But actually, in Italy, not only in Italy, the type of interest that the church attracts, the Catholic Church attracts, is impressive and very large. And even in this case, we had a sort of process that is following the same phases than in other cases. Namely, there is a great compassion for the suffering of the Pope during the time that he spent at the hospital, the hope of his recovery, and the mourning after his death. And as it is normal in the 20th and 21st century, after the death of the Pope, there is always a sense of discouraging loneliness. Who may fill the empty space that he will leave? That is not simply courtesy or monarchic nostalgia. It's also the sense that a man that has a very peculiar role in this planet, that is much more smart now, that is not executing Italian patriots like Pius IX or kidnapping Jewish kids as Pius IX. So without temporal power, without army, without weapons and so on, he is becoming much more beloved than before. The idea of the love around the Pope is a very recent way of feeling about him. And so this is the case also of Pope Francis, Jorge Mario Bergoglio. And so the death created a sense of loneliness that I was talking about. Then the 9 days that should separate the funeral of the Pope from the beginning of the conclave are also marking a typical move that is going from the morning to the perspective, from the past to the future. And so it is a moment in which ideas are coming out of what are the points in which the previous papacy must be corrected. And so very quickly for the cardinals and little by little for the public opinion, the mourning of this immense figure of the past Pope leaves also room to some critiques concerning the way in which he has behaved or governed and so on. And this happened also around Pope Francis, who was a man that on one side as a preacher, he was a great preacher with the capacity of warming up people around good ideas and good sentiment of compassion for the other one. On the side of government, he was very Jesuit, so very vertical, very executive order, if you can say it in American language, and also making some discontent around him. And then after 9 days in which rumors concerning the candidates, as they say in Italian, but it's becoming an international word, papabili, the man who can be Pope, are running, there is the conclave. And even in this case, it is the fourth time since 1978. The conclave was very short. Very, very short, only 4, 5, 6 scrutiny, and is making his job, namely to appoint a man with majority, 2/3 majority of the electors, that for us that are used to think in a democratic way is something that is beyond our imagination. Usually we think about the majority of the voters. But 2/3 of the electors means that there is no government, major, president, rector, or whatever that could be in place in this planet. And this majority came, as in many circumstances, with different type of things, in which there is a characteristic now relevant. On one side, there is too much, in my view, indulgence to the idea that there is a spiritual process, a secret way of God maneuvering these puppets that are the cardinals. And on the other, the idea that there is a real political move that is made of money, power, flags, and so on. While on the contrary, the story of the conclave and the success of the conclave, that is the most ancient electoral system surviving in this planet, is the fact that it is made of legal practices and clear rules. And this is what happened also in this case.
And your most recent book deals with the history of the conclave, and I think that one of the most steering aspects of the conclave is its secrecy. It is my understanding that the secrecy has a certain purpose in the process. Would you mind elaborating a little bit about how it came to be such a process and what purpose the secrecy serves?
Well, the advantage that we as historians have is that we live in a context of great religious literacy. So some legends that are confused with an interpretation of religious feelings, not only for Roman Catholicism, are very widespread. One of the legends that is always intriguing journalists and TV commentators in Rome during the conclave is that the conclave is like that since ever, more or less. That is a very, very old centuries and centuries and centuries of story. On the contrary, the conclave is absorbing needs and purposes day by day, stage by stage. So, for instance, the smoke that is now one of the symbols of the conclave started only in 1914. So it has more or less 1 century. For the Roman Catholic Church is not too much. It is the age of my father, more or less. And this was made for a practical reason. The conclave moved from the Palace of the Quirinal, now the house of the President of the Republic, that was taken to the Pope by the Italian monarchy in 1870, and moved to the Sistine. And so this was a way to give the announcement publicly, not only with the bells, as it was used in Rome. Secrecy is also very recent, because actually the conclave, the word means simply with a key, so a with key election. Conclave means this. The conclave has been designed in the 13th century not to protect the cardinals, but to urge them to an election, to put in a jail, possibly horrible jail, in order to make them take a decision as quick as possible. On the contrary, during the 19th century, when the nightmare of the Pope was that the anti-Catholic powers, the liberals, the Freemasons, the socialists, the Republicans may interfere with the election, the secrecy became a way of protecting them from the external influences. And as many of the rule of the conclave, at the first test, it doesn't work. because the first test of this very strong secret was in 1903. But in this case, the Emperor of Austria, Franz Joseph, sent a veto against the candidate. The veto was a possibility of the so-called Catholic crowns, and so they protected the conclave from external enemies who didn't appear at all on the horizon, and on the contrary, they did protect it from the Catholic power. But now secret is becoming very relevant, because in the world in which the social media are making everything public, many people think that we are all very interested to know how are the spaghetti carbonara that are eating in Rome. So this may be also a new to be considered. The fact that there is a moment in which nothing is known about is making the election very, very interesting, because at least, thanks God, there is something that is not on the social, no TikTok, no media, no nothing at all. And even if the secret usually in a few days or months or weeks becomes less important, we know actually what happened into the conclave through diplomatic sources, journalistic confidences, diaries and so on. The secret at the moment of the election is creating this great suspense that no Hollywood movie can create.
Right. And you mentioned the Hollywood movies. I imagine that a lot of our listeners are both informed by the media, but also by cultural depictions of the conclave and the papacy. Only recently, Conclave, the Hollywood production that depicted the election of a pope. I know that you have also consulted on several projects. Could you tell me a little bit about what the potential pitfalls that you warn producers as they begin thinking about depicting the papacy and the conclave?
Well, the real works that I've done is with Paolo Sorrentino for the young pope and the new pope, and it was a very interesting experience for me. I've never done nothing like that before, and so the idea of Paolo Sorrentino was to make a movie on loneliness. Actually, loneliness in a religious experience. So his idea was to create a pope that was made this way. And what is amazing today is that in this moment, he had two problems that asked me to solve, and I hope I've solved it, one in a good way, the other not so good way. The first problem was how to make a pope that was very far from reality. And so I said, well, an American pope. They cannot elect an American pope. After World War II, there are two sort of non-written rules that said that there must be no American pope, because no pope may come from a superpower, and not a French pope, because the colonial history of France is too recent to take the risk of electing a pope from France. So what we've seen now is actually that the American pope has come after 8 years of the World War II. And so the other was a preoccupation of Paolo Sorrentino, namely not to offend the Catholic people, and to depict through his artistic imagination things that could be considered embarrassing or depriving the Roman Catholic Church of its dignity and so on. And I said, well, don't worry, I will check of all what you may think of, that there is a precedent that can justify what you're saying. And actually, it was very easy, because the story of the Roman Catholic Church is very long, and so as many good things are part of its history, also much more embarrassing things are parts of its history, and so it was not complicated to do this. What is relevant for me is that even for the entertainment system, this idea of the small world that is representing something larger is evident. And if one want to joke with the title, actually, instead of the House of Cards, in the sense of cards, like in the movie, the Conclave is an house of cards instead of cardinals.
Right.
And so it works not so different, even if there is another Francis in power.
You mentioned that an American pope seemed like an impossibility as you were discussing it. And was that still the opinion that you held going into the 2025 conclave, thinking about the process before we saw the result?
Well, I was only impressed by a sort of Kabbalistic coincidence that the conclave came right at the 80th anniversary of the Second World War.
Right.
And marking a great difference with the world of the the post-war time, the 8 years of the post-war times, in which apparently the paradigm of the post-World War II are shaken. So the members of the Security Council of the UN do not have simply different position as they had during all the Cold War, but they are dismantling this idea, and they are creating something very different that is a sort of insecurity council that is now dominating our time. And so I was wondering if this could have been the end of the prejudice of the 8 years of after the Second World War. And actually, when I heard that one of the candidates was Cardinal Aveline of Marseille, I thought that probably the old not rules, but the old common ideas that was not even necessary to express were shaken, could open the door also to an American Pope that actually is a very complicated guy, because he's born in North America, but the Bishop of South America. He is a member of a religious order like Francis, but of a small religious order like the Augustinian friars. He is a man with a doctorate in canon law in the greatest faculty of theology of Rome, the Angelicum, where even Wojtyla has taken his doctoral title, and a man that has not written a book in all his life. And the only thing that we know that he has definitely written is his thesis that is on the role of the prior in the small order of about 1,800 people. So a man that has spent all his life in a sort of shadow of humility, and now the shadow is over and the lights and spotlights are all on him, and we will very soon know what will happen.
Is you called him a man of shadow and a man into shadows, and I wonder if that's part of the reason that you speculate that he was an appealing candidate for papacy.
My sense is that this conclave was very much like the conclave that elected Ratzinger. Even in the election of Ratzinger, there was a favorite candidate. In this time it was Ratzinger. In this case it was Cardinal Parolin, Secretary of State of the Holy See. Both member of the Roman Curia since a long while, for different reasons. For both is true. What happened is that to be elected in the fourth scrutiny, the first of the second afternoon, means something. In the conclave, with the present regulation, there is one ballot the first evening, then two ballots the first morning, then two ballots the second afternoon, and then they go with 4 ballots per day for 7 days, then there is a pause. And to come after lunch, not at the second ballot, but the first one, means that between noon and the afternoon there has been a great move of votes. Because when somebody says, yesterday it was written by Le Figaro, that in the morning Prevost had many votes, I don't know how much, but many votes. Even if this is true, this doesn't mean to reach the 2/3. Two-thirds is not almost 2/3, it's 2/3. And this is the reason, because in the conclave, the last vote are much more important than the first one,
right.
that you can get. It's not like an election in which no state in the US or no elector in the democratic West knows what the other are doing. There are just guess. In this case, it's different. And what I think is that he has been considered at a certain point by Parolin himself the best option instead of going on for another day. And so, like in 2005, it was Cardinal Martini who moved a few votes from Bergoglio to Ratzinger to elect Benedict XVI. In this case, it was Parolin that moved his own votes on Prevost to have him as a pope. And probably this fact of this very mild person with a visible humility in his attitude, with no idea of willing to be a leader or a commander-in-chief of nothing at all. This could have been attracting for many of the cardinals that are, if not upset or discontent, they hope that the style of Francis will come to an end.
And you mentioned that we don't know a lot about him, or perhaps even his views from the little that we do know. What can we expect from him in the papacy? And I would also add to that, not only from the views that we have already articulated, but from an American-born pontiff.
Well, we don't know very much about him, and this is very, very true. To say what he may do is very unpredictable. So now it is a moment, also this typical enough, in which there are commentators or ecclesiastical persons who say he will be like Francis II, he will be like John Paul III, he will be a man that will change everything, he will change nothing, we will continue, we will discontinue. But these are really wishful thinking of people even in position of high responsibility. But they don't know very much, and we don't know very much either. Because actually there is no idea of what is actually his policy that will come. On one side, we have a few records, iPhone records, Twitter of the past, in which we have something that is very normal. During Ratzinger, he was speaking like a Ratzingerian bishop. During Bergoglio, like a Bergoglian bishop. This is part of the contract of a bishop, to say that the Pope is right. One way or another, the other way to say that the Pope is right. But what he will do now that he himself has the right and the duty to give direction, we have no idea. One thing that may be interesting is that probably he will try to follow and to use much more than his predecessor the Roman Curia, so the big, huge and complicated stuff that is around the Pope. Usually the Curia had a bad reputation in the past 5 centuries, and Augustinian friars like Prevost was Martin Luther, who had a very bad idea about the Roman Curia, but other, not Augustinian, had the same idea. But also the Curia can bring to him good advices and good ideas. For instance, in Italy now everybody is very happy because the first thing that he has done is to write a personal letter of invitation to the chief rabbi in Rome to his coronation. That will be the first Mass on Sunday, May the 25th, and to the American Jewish Congress.
Interesting.
That is something that it is not surprising. In principle, the relation between the Jewish communities and the Roman Catholic Church were good enough. With Francis, there have been some crises, not enough to persuade the chief rabbi of Rome to not attend the funeral of Francis, even if it were on Shabbat. But we don't know what will follow, because this is a kind act, a gentle act, coming in the framework of a protocol After this, there is what will happen soon, which will be the order of his international flights. The Pope is expected to be in Iznik in the ancient Nicaea in July for the celebration of the first ecumenical council that is the basis of the common faith among the churches. But I know the Cardinal Pizzaballa told that even he is expected to come to Israel very soon, but we don't know how soon it will be, because when the cardinals elect a pope, what happens is very simple and very easy to understand. They elect a cardinal, after 10 seconds he is the pope, and so he can do whatever he wants indeed. And so all the speculation, promises, expectation that are very legitimate in the 10 seconds before, after 10 seconds can be revised very carefully.
Right. Is there anything we can learn from his choice of papal name?
Well, the papal name is the only thing that we have about a man like him that has not written a book, a treaty, a long interview, an autobiography, or dozens of books like Ratzinger, a commentary of Vatican II, like Wojtyla. So to speculate on the name is an exercise that he has the only game we can play in this moment. He said that his idea of the name of Leo was because of Leo XIII, the last lion of the series. That is the Pope that issued a great document concerning the social question of the society. And so he said that today AI and techno-titans are the new social question for the church, but it's not very much to understand. What is clear that he didn't want to use one of the name for different reasons that were available. So he didn't want to be Francis II because this could probably what his majority asked him not to do, to be different from Francis. He didn't want to be a Benedict. So he didn't want to emphasize the difference between Benedict and Francis. He didn't accept either John Paul III or John or Paul that are in the names, marking a distance also from this type of dynasty coming from Vatican II. He didn't accept to be named Pius, because actually the memory of Pius XII is still questioned. And so the first free name going back toward the past was Leo, and we will see what type of lion he will be, if it will be Metro Goldwyn Prevost or something different.
Great. One final question, and it's one that deals with the conclave itself. And again, as I mentioned, part of what you've written is a history of the conclave. And you mentioned that the last one was rather short, just like the previous two, at least, if not more. You've advocated a few minor but significant changes to the conclave to allow perhaps for more time of deliberation or for consideration. Would you mind elaborating a little bit about the reforms that you've suggested?
Yeah, when scholars have too much free time, they are tempted to give undesired advices to the decision makers. And so my sense was that in the world of the social media, there is an unexpected danger for the Pope, namely the fact that his credibility can be questioned by accusation, false or true, on the social media that can explode and create a noise that could threaten the institutional stability of the Roman Catholic Church. So my suggestion was to keep the cardinals, as soon as they arrive in Rome, already in Santa Marta, that is this hotel in which Francis used to live, that was designed for hosting the cardinals during the conclave at the guest of the Holy Father in other moments, and to reduce the number of ballots per day, in order to reduce the possibility of what happened, namely an emotional move toward a candidate that many did not know enough, and creating much more time for the election. Actually, Francis was totally against any type of reform of the conclave. He was happy of his own experience, and he didn't consider this risk too much. What happened actually with Francis is that I was wrong, but not totally wrong. A few seconds after his election, a couple of persons came up from Chiclayo, his diocese in Peru, saying that he had covered the accusation of pedophilia against some priest that, thanks God, were not so credible and were not also acceptable, because Father Prevost was appointed to Chiclayo for a case that was shaking the church in Peru, namely an organization, the Sodalizio, that was a movement in which many cases of abuse have been registered. And so he was there to dismantle this organization that was powerful enough, with great ramification in many countries in Latin America. And it was not by chance, in my view, that on January the 30th, 2025, so 3 months after the death of Pope Francis, the Sodalizio was definitely cancelled from the list of the Roman Catholic movements. But the idea that you may formulate accusations against the new Pope is something that may happen, and I'm persuaded that to reduce the number of votes and to create a more quiet room around them, it could be a way of making a less a choice that will not last less than this case, maybe more than 1 day or 2 days, but this will not be a problem. That the Church can survive even 2 days more without a Pope.
Professor Alberto Melloni, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us, and thank you for being here in Tel Aviv and at Tel Aviv 360. Thank you.
To you and to the listener for Tel Aviv 360.
Tel Aviv 360, Israel's largest and most diverse podcast.